Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of How Stories Work. Today, I want to talk about Titanic and show you something that I think is pretty incredible. Just the other day, I was watching Titanic and I realized I had yet to put the story form into subtext. What I did is I came into the premise builder and I started to build the structure of the story based on what the film was actually trying to say. Now, most people would probably think the objective story plot would be in either physics or universe because they're on a ship and the ship hits an iceberg and they go down. But the truth of the matter lies in the fact that James Cameron, what he was really exploring were these societal classism sort of issues between rich and poor, and this feeling that I deserve to live over you because I'm rich. It was the whole argument between those at the top of the ship versus those on the bottom of the ship. That was where all the conflict came into play. So it wasn't really anything to do with anything physical up here. It had everything to do with what was actually mental. So the objective story plot was actually down here in the mind domain, which is when you find people coming into conflict over fixed attitudes and prejudices. And then for reasons I don't really want to get into in this video, I put Rose up in the physics domain, Jack down here in the psychology domain, and then their relationship in the universe. They think we have no future because you're rich and I'm poor. And then what I did is I came down here, I picked some other things that I'll get into in a different video. And then once I had the entire story, I just clicked build story and it gave me this premise here. Opening yourself up to lacking presumption manages being valuable while sending you down the path of becoming more present. Titanic is a holistic story structure. It's organized around relationships. The premise is going to be a little awkward, opening yourself up to lacking presumption. In other words, when you open yourself up to not being presumptuous about whether or not you deserve something because you're rich, then that manages these issues over what's more important. In other words, who gets to go on the lifeboat and who has to stay behind, while sending you down the path of becoming more present. The story, while it's a tragedy, it's actually a good thing for Rose. And here you can see the objective story here in mind. And then here's the argument between the two of them. Rose here is coming from a place of presumption. Even though she's born into wealth, she lacks that presumption that she is somehow owed something different than those in steerage. That's what sets her apart. But then Jack is coming here from a place of proven. So having had to live a life constantly on the run and a life where you have to constantly prove your worth, Jack knows what must be done to survive. That's the balancing argument between the two of them. Again, because it's a holistic story structure, the argument isn't so much one has to win over the other, but more how are you going to balance these two things. So then I come down here, and this is the part that I wanted to share with you. Once you plug in this premise up here at the top, then subtext goes through and predicts what's supposed to happen in each act. Here you have the main character through line, influence character through line, the relationship story through line, and the objective story through line. And these are the thematic conflicts that are supposed to happen in each act according to each through line. It also goes through and predicts the scenes. And when I first flipped through here, what I got really excited about is if I go down into the fourth act, I saw fate. And I thought that was great because I thought, oh yeah, that's perfect. This is when it hits the iceberg. So that's their fate. But then I looked up online, tried to look for the midpoint of Titanic. And I found out that the midpoint of the film is actually when they hit the iceberg. And that this point here is when they start to go down, when the bow of the ship starts to go beneath the water. And at first I was bummed because I thought, oh, this would be really great. It predicted exactly what was supposed to happen. So all these scenes are what subtext predicted should happen in each act. This isn't something that's set up beforehand. It's completely based on what it is the story is trying to say. But then I realized that fate actually works better because if you think about it, this is when their fate is sealed. So once the front of the ship goes under the water, that's it. We're dead. So then if you come back up here and you look at this gray one is the objective story plot. So I'm just going to focus on this one. If you look here at openness, and then you look here behind it, fantasy, this is the coolest part ever. So fantasy is this delusion because this is where Rose thinks, I'm going to leave with you, Jack. Everything's great. So this is this fantasy element that's at play here. Then bam, they hit the iceberg. And then now there's all this openness, like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Nothing's going to happen to us. And then, yeah, you know what? We'll put things off. We'll just delay and I'm sure everything will be fine. Somebody will come save us. And then they have to start making choices as to who gets to go first and who doesn't. So this is women and children first. And then that bleeds into preconceptions. And this is where you start to get into the conflict over, hey, I'm rich, I deserve this. You're poor, you don't deserve this. And then that's when everybody on the boat starts coming into conflict with one another. So while there are elements of people fighting and pulling against each other and being knocked into the water and all that stuff, the real source of conflict, where everything is coming from, what he was really exploring, were these fixed attitudes. And it's only once those preconceptions kick in that we know we're going to be in really big trouble when we go into the last act. And when that bow goes under the water and their fate is sealed, everybody can start predicting and seeing where things are going to go. And then this is the madness, all the interdiction. Once you know that you're doomed, interdiction is when you try to avoid that. You try to do anything to make sure that doesn't happen. This is where you have all those great scenes of people trying to avoid a fate that they can't escape. And that's when you get the rich buying their way onto the lifeboats. But then you also get to see those who have no intention of trying to avoid their fate. They get a brandy and they sit down and they watch the water coming. That's how that plays out. And then finally, the last one, this is the one that got me really excited, was this last destiny bit. The difference between fate is bad luck or cursed, and destiny is the path that you're headed towards. And if you think of that last line, which was afterward, the 700 people on the boats had nothing to do but wait to die, wait to live, wait for an absolution that would never come. That is destiny. And that to me is the most amazing thing about this, that Subtxt was able to go through and predict exactly what was supposed to happen in the second half of this film, based completely on just what it was about. It predicted there'll be some sort of fantasy element here, and then they're going to get hit by something, and then they'll be open about it. They won't think too much about it. They'll try and put things off, and then they'll have to start making choices of who gets to live. And then their preconceptions of whether or not they deserve to be on a boat compared to those in steerage. And then once the bow of the ship goes below and they realize their fate is sealed, then they start freaking out because, oh, this is the end. What are we going to do? And so then they start trying to interdict on behalf of themselves or those who don't. And then those who did are then faced with this doomed destiny of an absolution that would never come. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on how stories work. And if you have any questions about any of this, please leave a comment below. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow.